On AFL.com.au as Grand Final week continues, our special guest is the Chief Executive of the AFL, Andrew Demetriou. Andrew, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure, Matt.
Let's start by talking about the grand finalists, Hawthorn and Sydney. Why do you think they're the two best teams in the competition this season?
But Hawthorn and Sydney, they've been the two dominant teams for mine, and that game that they played just a few weeks ago, I think, I even said at the time there could be a replay of the grand final, and I hope it is, because they've both dominated, they've both got exceptionally good lists, coached well. It's a fine matchup, you know, and I'm tipping the Swans because I think they've been terrific all year. I think they match up well against Hawthorn, but, you know, it's going to be fantastic.
You've changed your tune about the Swans over the years, haven't you? Back in 2005, you famously used words unattractive and ugly. I think with the ugly words...
I've never used the word ugly.
I was reading a quote that perhaps you were quoting someone else when you used the word ugly, but whatever the case, that was a story back in 2005. Do you like watching them play now?
I like watching all teams play, and I love the Sydney Swans. I mean, I was there last Friday night, and if you didn't get out of your seat when Lewis Jetta broke the line and ran, you know, half the ground to kick that goal, it's exhilarating, and they've got some fantastic players. Their midfield's great, you know, with Josh Kennedy and Kieran Jack, a great ruck combination, excellent defence. I mean, they've got a beautifully balanced team now, and I'm really pleased for John Longmire. I mean, I know John, I've known him for a long time. Was there in London when he played his first ever game for North Melbourne as a 16-year-old, and he had the eye opener because it was that bloodbath. And he's such a fine person. It's just a real... I mean, it's really, you know, fitting that he's got a team to the grand finals. He deserves it. He's a terrific person.
Where do you think it changed for them if they were unattractive in 2005 to now? What's changed over the past 7 years?
Look, I think in the year that they won the grand final, I think that in the second half of the season they played a fantastic brand of football. And the fact that grand final was one of the all-time epics, and the following year, I'm not critical of them at all. And in fact, if you go back on any of interviews that I've ever given, I've always said that Paul Roos was a wonderful coach, and he is a wonderful coach, and if he ever decided to coach again, he'd be in hot demand.
Just before we move on, how important is that for the Sydney market that the Swans have done what they've done?
Look, it's terribly important, because we always said that some of the factors and, you know, and the rationale as to why we introduced two new teams in Queensland and New South Wales was in part to help the teams there. You know, we needed an extra 40-odd players to help promote the game. We wanted a match every weekend to improve the content and the coverage. You know, they're in markets where they're competing with other football codes. So we needed to have another football team to help support that. And we then said that, in our view, that they would respond and compete. And look at Brisbane, I think they're turning it around slowly. They've won 10 games this year and are on the up. You look at Sydney, I mean, last year they signed increase in their sponsorships off field, playing off in a grand final this year. They've never bottomed out. They've never bottomed out. So it's really important that in time, if we can have two strong franchises in each market, it's really, really important in what is an incredibly competitive market.
When we look at the Hawks lead up to the grand final, a lot of people critical about the fact that they had to play a Saturday prelim. What's the contract situation there with ANZ Stadium? Are you looking to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or is there nothing you can do?
No, I think we can. I mean, I think, in fairness to Hawthorn, that's absolutely correct, that they should have been playing Friday night. But because we didn't have the SCG available with a 50,000 capacity, it just left us with little leverage and little option. So I can tell you, when the SCG is at full capacity, if for whatever reason the contractual obligations that they have at ANZ means that the ground's not available for the AFL, then we wouldn't compromise a top team. We would play at the SCG and we'd play on the right night. So I think it was a one-off this year because of the redevelopment at the SCG. We understand the contractual obligation, but it was only because the SCG wasn't available.
We saw some flexibility problems though as well earlier in the finals with Subiaco, and there was a rugby match booked, and I don't think it really mattered in the end because of the way that the fixture went. But does the AFL...
I think it matters. I think it matters. I think it compromises our finals, the integrity of the finals. It's incomprehensible to us, and we've made the point that the West Australian Football Commission could book a rugby union test in September. You know, AFL football is the biggest tenant at Subiaco. It's helped build that ground, has helped subsidise football, and we are entitled, after teams play off all year, to know that the ground is exclusively used for AFL football, like it is everywhere else in Australia. So we've made that point clear. We don't anticipate it happening again. If they want to play rugby union tests, they can play them in the third week of September or the last week, and they can play them on a Sunday.
Okay, so that's done.
That's what we've told, and that's what we've requested.
Moving back to expansion, Carmichael Hunt, his match-winning goal. We did a story about how much publicity that generated in Queensland. That was just an amazing story. What about your other rugby league convert, though, Israel Folau? He's copped a great deal of criticism, including from an AFL.com.au writer, James Dampney, who actually did a column saying he should consider switching back to rugby league. What do you make of criticism like that about Israel Folau?
Well, it's the beauty of our game, that it's such a great democratic game that people are entitled to have their views. And
what's your view?
Well, my view is that I think that anyone who rules out Israel Folau being a success does it at their peril. Just like I said about Carmichael Hunt. So what you've got to understand about these guys, that these guys are superbly motivated athletes who succeed in everything they do. And Israel Folau, doing what he's doing in his sort of second year of AFL football, it's actually going pretty well. And playing in a team that's getting thumped every week, playing in a position where he's got the ball coming in not that often and being taken out of the forward line very quickly when it does get up there. I think he showed in the last game he's got some potential. This is a hard game to learn if you haven't been brought up on the game. And you only got to look at Jim Stein's ascendancy. You've only got to look at how Carmichael Hunt's progressed. You'll see a much better Israel Folau next year, and you'll probably see an infinitely better Israel Folau the following year. And I know there's people out there that want Israel Folau to fail. I just think you should stand by.
Would you be disappointed if he himself decided that he wanted out?
No, I mean, if that's what Israel Folau wants to do from a personal perspective, I'll respect whatever he does. But in my view, he's going pretty well, and his stats are comparable to when Cameron Mooney started and when Jonathan Brown started and others started who've played the game all their lives. So, look, he's fair fodder, like we all are, but stay tuned.
All right, let's move back to the start of this week, the Brownlow. How do you think the night went?
What a great winner. What a great winner. What a great endorsement and advertisement for the game. The way he spoke, the humble, the family. And Tim Watson, the father-son rule is just it's so unique to our game. We should celebrate this wonderful rule, because when that happens, when you see Joe Watson up there who sounds like his father, it's just fantastic. So I was really pleased and proud of the Brownlow. It rated well. It's a great event. It's a really, really fantastic event, the Brownlow Medal, and I can't imagine how it could have got as good as it's got, because it's exceeded all my expectations.
You think the father-son rule with Tim and Job is the perfect example of why anyone in football who complains about that rule and talks about it being unfair and compromising the draft, you think this is evidence as to why it just has to stay and it cannot change?
Well, we haven't had any complaints since we introduced the bidding system. I think it's a fair system. But, what a great thing when you can go to the football and watch Tom Hawkins running around, and you can watch Gary Ablett, and then all of a sudden there's our Brownlow Medal winner who sounds and looks like his father. It's unique, and I'm in awe of it.
All right, we've got a couple more things to talk about. Free agency, we're about to see, I guess, a changing face in the game. This is a big change, one of the biggest changes we've seen in the game. What's your thoughts on what we're going to see over the next month?
I think it's good for the game, create a lot of discussion. We've never feared free agency. We believe in creating. We did we went into the discussions with the Players Association in good faith, because we support their view that there needs to be more movement in the system. There'll be some players that take up the option of free agency, and they'll help create a market. Good dialogue, good discussion. I think it's a good thing for the game, and take note that we're one of the few sports that hasn't had a form of free agency. I welcome it, and I think it's going to be good for the game.
That's the players. What about football departments? So you've spoken about football department spending throughout the year. Is there anything more that the Commission can do? Is that something that's still on the agenda in terms of trying to manage that?
Look, we raised this with the Presidents at the President's meeting the other day, and I think in general there is agreement that we've got to be careful that we don't create the haves and the have-nots, and that the gap between the stronger and richer clubs doesn't grow to an extent that they've got unlimited spending on these sorts of areas and that the others can't keep up. And when they try to keep up, they try to copy. They haven't got the financial wherewithal to do that. So they're areas that are really challenging that we've got to face. What we have seen sort of thankfully is that the football department spends across players, coaches, and most parts of football departments have been pretty responsible the last 12 months. We're in our benchmarking. It's been less than whatever it is, 4%. Well, the one area that hasn't been curtailed is the area of sports science, and that's an area that seems to have gone off the dial, and that's something we've raised with the clubs about. You've got to be very careful.
Are they listening, do you think, though? Because
I think they do. I mean, the club presidents and boards are pretty responsible people. You know, the governance at football clubs now has improved significantly. I think they listen. The challenge is, what do we do about it as a collective? And I think as an industry, we've got to work together to look at those issues. And is there something that we're missing, or is there something that we need to tweak here and there? But I think in the main, everyone agrees that they don't want the gap to get too big.
But would you cap it?
No, that wasn't something that was discussed. I mean, I've said publicly that you don't want to retard innovation. You don't want to disincentivise people. The product that we're putting out there at the moment, the game itself is fantastic, and it is innovative, and the athletes are superb. So why would we want to put a handbrake on that? The question is, how do we just be careful of this explosion in certain areas, and can it be too much? You know, to what degree? How do we get the balance right? That's a conundrum.
Just finally, if I can, I'd like to ask about you, which is an interesting question every time it comes up. You had a break during the year.
A very low publicised break.
Not publicised at all.
Yeah.
I'm sure you had a good time. You say you've come back refreshed and rejuvenated.
Can't you tell?
Yeah, absolutely. You've spoken about being involved in some really big projects that are happening in the game, in terms of the Burswood project in Perth, the project in Adelaide, and kind of seeing them through. Is that a sign that you really are in this for the long term, and you're not going anywhere for the foreseeable future?
Look, Matt, I've said from day one, being involved in this job is a great privilege, and it's an honour, and I've never taken it for granted. Not from the day that Ron Evans told me that I got the job, that I've never not understood the deep obligation of the game. And I've been very fortunate that, you know, it's 9 years this Saturday that I've been in the job, and got to work with the most wonderful group of executives, wonderful people who have achieved so much together, and supported by a great board and great staff. So I'm very fortunate, I'm lucky. And I love working in this game and love doing what I'm doing. So I've come back very refreshed. I've said to people there are lots of challenges going forward, 18 profitable clubs, the expansion, New South Wales, Queensland. There's another broadcast agreement not too far around the corner. We've got AFL Media. We've got Adelaide Oval coming along in 2014. We've got what's happening in WA. What a great thing to look forward to. So I don't look too far ahead, but what I do know is that I can't wait to go to work every day, and I'm looking forward to the next challenges. And sometimes you look forward to the challenges you don't even know are around the corner. So unless people are getting sick of me and you know something I don't, hopefully we can do this all again next year.
That would be terrific. You mentioned the broadcast rights. I mean, that's coming up in the next, I guess, 3 years. You might start really making a move on. I know you think you've mentioned that you have started, early talks about it.
We do. Look, we've never made any secret of the fact, with the team that we've got headed up by Gil, that they're already thinking about the next broadcast rights agreement. So they're doing all the preparatory work.
And do you want to see it through, though, this particular deal?
Oh, I hope so. It'd be great. I mean, I've loved doing the last two, and we seem to have got lucky with the number and the sort of qualitative outcomes. And God, if I'm still required, you just never know.
Do you need a succession plan? I know you don't decide your replacement, whoever that may be.
Of course you do. Of course you do, because any CEO who's the CEO of any organisation, if they're not providing options for succession to the board, they're not doing the right thing by their organisation.
Is there an actual agreement, a succession agreement in place?
No, there is obviously people within this organisation, and one in particular who everyone knows is someone who I've got a very high regard for, who's just knocked back a significant offer from the NRL, who I think would make a wonderful successor to me. But it's a board decision, and I won't be on the board when that decision is made.
And you alluded to this at the start, but you're tipping the Swans.
I am. Swans by less than a goal, and could be a draw, and we could be doing this again next week.
You always really barrack for a draw, don't you?
My Chief Financial Officer does.
Andrew Demetriou, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Matt. All the best.